The first time Jarrett lost to Drika Coran at the Timber's End Tavern, he could have won. He felt it the moment their hands locked together across the scarred oak table, the tremor in her forearm, the way her green fingers adjusted their grip twice before settling. She was strong, stronger than any woman he had ever met, orc or human, but he was stronger. He knew it in his bones the way a man knows when he can lift a beam or when he needs help. The knowledge sat quiet in his chest as he let her force his knuckles down to the wood, as the crowd roared, as she grinned with those small white tusks catching the firelight. "Better luck next time, farm boy," she said, not unkindly, and released his hand. Ethan rubbed his wrist and smiled. "Guess I owe you a drink." She had been coming to the tavern for 3 weeks. Ever since the logging camp up the mountain had hired a crew of orc workers to clear deadfall before winter. The other orcs kept to themselves, drank their ale in a corner, and left before the evening grew too rowdy. Drika stayed. She had claimed the table by the fire and issued her challenge to anyone who would listen. Beat her at arm-wrestling and she would pay for your drinks all night. Lose and you paid for hers. She had not bought a single round. Ethan had watched her for 5 nights before he worked up the courage to sit down across from her. She was not what he expected. The other orc women in the crew were thick-shouldered and quiet, built like the trees they felled. Drika was lean and athletic, with long arms roped with muscle and a frame that reminded him of the ranch dogs back home, built for endurance, not brute force. Her black hair was pulled into a braid that fell past her shoulders, and her eyes were the color of amber in sunlight. When she looked at him, really looked, he felt something shift beneath his ribs. "You sure about this?" she had asked that first night. "I have been working a plow since I was 12, Ethan said. "I think I can manage." She had managed him instead, and he had paid for her ale and her dinner, and she had talked to him for an hour about the mountains and the timber and the way the stars looked different this far north. When she finally rose to leave, he realized he had not thought about anything else the entire time. So the next night he came back, and he lost again. The tavern keeper, a grizzled man named Roland, gave Ethan a pitying look as he slid 2 mugs across the bar. "You know she has beaten every man in 3 townships, right? I noticed. And you keep coming back." Ethan carried the mugs to the table where Drika waited, one elbow already propped. "I am an optimist." She laughed at that, a real laugh that made her eyes crinkle. Or a fool, could be both. They locked hands. He watched her face instead of their joined fingers, watched the way she bit her lower lip when she pushed, the faint scar above her left eyebrow, the freckles across her nose that he had not noticed before. When his hand hit the table, he was still smiling. "You are getting worse," she said. "I am out of practice." "You farm, do you not? How are you out of practice?" He shrugged and went to buy her drink. When he returned, she had moved her chair slightly, making room for him beside her instead of across. He took the seat and felt the warmth of the fire on one side, the warmth of her shoulder inches from his on the other. They talked about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood in the Southern Territories, about her father who had been a blacksmith and her mother who had raised goats. He told her about his family's homestead at the edge of the valley, about the wheat fields and the apple orchard and the way the wind sounded through the grain in late summer. "Why did you come north?" he asked. "Work," she said simply. "The camps pay well and I wanted to see the mountains." "Are they what you expected?" She looked toward the tavern window where darkness pressed against the glass. "They are lonely." He did not know what to say to that, so he bought her another drink instead. By the end of the 2nd week, it had become a routine. Ethan would finish his work in the fields, wash at the pump, and walk the 2 miles into town. Drika would be waiting at her table, and they would clasp hands and he would lose, and they would talk until the fire burned low. He learned that she liked her ale dark, that she had a sweet tooth for honey cakes, that she hummed when she was thinking. She learned that he was 23, that he lived alone since his parents had passed 3 years prior, that he was saving money to buy the southern 40 acres from his neighbor. "You could win, you know," Roland said one night while Ethan waited at the bar. "I have seen you lift a beer barrel one-handed. You are stronger than you let on." Ethan watched Drika across the room. She was laughing at something another patron had said, her head thrown back. "Maybe I like buying her drinks." Roland studied him for a long moment, then shook his head. "You are going to get your heart broken, boy. Probably." But he came back the next night anyway. It was late autumn now, and the mountain passes would close soon. The logging crews were finishing their contracts, and Ethan knew without asking that Drika would leave with them. The knowledge sat heavy in his stomach every time he walked to the tavern, every time he took her hand and felt her strength against his, every time she smiled at him like he was the only person in the room. "You are distracted tonight," she said, after she beat him for the 17th time. "Long day, liar." She leaned back in her chair, studying him. What is wrong? He wanted to tell her. He wanted to say that he had been losing on purpose since the very first night, that every defeat was just an excuse to stay near her, that the thought of her leaving made his chest ache. Instead, he said, "Nothing, just tired." She did not believe him. He could see it in her eyes. But she let it go, and they talked about other things. And when the tavern closed, he walked her back to the logging camp and watched her disappear into the bunkhouse before he made the long walk home alone. The stranger arrived on a Saturday night in early November, when the first snow was threatening in the northern sky. He was huge, even by human standards, with a barrel chest and arms like oak logs. He wore his hair in a top knot and had a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. "I hear there is an orc woman here who thinks she can out-wrestle anyone," he announced to the tavern at large. The room went quiet. Drika set down her mug slowly. "I do not think," she said. "I know." The stranger grinned. "I am Magnus Stone. I have beaten the strongest men from here to the coast. I have never lost to a woman, and I have certainly never lost to an orc." Ethan felt his hands curl into fists under the table. Drika stood, and even though the stranger had 6 inches and 50 pounds on her, she did not look small. "Sit down, then," she said. The crowd pressed close as they took their positions. Magnus made a show of rolling his shoulders, cracking his knuckles. Drika simply set her elbow and waited. "When you lose," Magnus said, "you are going to tell everyone here that humans are superior to orcs. You are going to apologize for wasting our time. I am not going to lose. We will see." Ethan watched from 3 feet away, his heart hammering. He could see the tension in Drika's jaw, the way her fingers trembled slightly before they locked with Magnus's. This was not a friendly wager anymore. This was something else. Roland counted down. They started. Magnus was strong, genuinely strong, and he was not holding back. Drika's arm bent backward almost immediately, and the crowd murmured. Ethan saw the flash of panic in her eyes, quickly hidden. She set her feet and pushed back, her whole body straining. Their joined hands hovered at the midpoint, neither gaining ground. "Give up, Greenskin," Magnus hissed. Drika's arm buckled another inch. Sweat beaded on her forehead. The crowd was shouting now, some for her, more for Magnus. Ethan could not breathe. He had spent weeks losing to her on purpose, and now he was going to watch her lose for real, watch her be humiliated by this brute who wanted to grind her pride into the dirt. Her knuckles were 2 inches from the table. "Come on, Drika," Ethan said, not shouting, just loud enough for her to hear. "You have got this." She glanced at him just for a heartbeat, and something in her face changed. She sucked in a breath and roared. a sound that rattled the windows and drove Magnus's hand sideways with such force that it slammed into the wood hard enough to crack the table. The tavern erupted. Magnus sat back, cradling his wrist, his face purple with rage. Drika stood, breathing hard, and looked down at him. "Humans are not superior to orcs," she said quietly. "And you are not superior to me." She walked out of the tavern before anyone could stop her. Ethan found her behind the building, leaning against the wall with her eyes closed. Her right arm hung limp at her side. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "I am fine." "Drika," she opened her eyes. "I am fine, Ethan. I just need a minute." He moved closer slowly, like she was a spooked horse. "You won." "I almost did not. But you did." She laughed, a bitter sound. "You know what the worst part is? He was not even the strongest man I have faced." Ethan went very still. "What do you mean?" "I mean I have wrestled men stronger than him and won. I have beaten tree cutters and blacksmiths and soldiers. But tonight I was scared." She looked at her hand, still trembling slightly. "I was scared because it mattered. Because if I lost, it would not have just been me losing. It would have been every orc who ever got called a savage, every woman who ever got told she was weak, and I almost cracked under it. You did not crack. You won." "Barely." Ethan took a breath. This was the moment. He could feel it like a change in the weather. "What if I told you that you could be stronger?" She frowned. "What are you talking about? I could train you, show you technique, how to use leverage instead of just muscle." "You are already good, Drika. You could be unbeatable." "Why would you do that?" "Because I am in love with you," he thought. "Because I have been losing on purpose for weeks just to spend time with you, and if training you means I get to spend more time with you before you leave, I will take it." "Because you deserve to win," he said. She studied him for a long moment, and he wondered what she saw. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, teach me." They started the next morning at Ethan's farm. He cleared space in the barn and set up a small table. Drika arrived just after dawn, her breath misting in the cold air. "First thing you need to understand," Ethan said, "is that arm wrestling is not about raw strength. It is about leverage, speed, and knowing your opponent's weaknesses." He showed her how to position her body, how to use her shoulder and back instead of just her arm, how to attack at an angle instead of straight on. She was a quick learner, adapting to each new technique with a focus that made him ache. They practiced for hours, and when she finally pinned his hand to the table using the technique he had just taught her, she grinned so wide he forgot how to speak. "Again," she said. They went again, and again. Ethan felt the old instinct rising, the urge to let her win, but he pushed it down. She did not need him to lose anymore. She needed him to challenge her, so he started fighting back for real. The first time he beat her straight up, her eyes went wide. "You have been holding back." "Teaching," he corrected. "There is a difference. You are stronger than you pretended to be." "Maybe." She sat back, turning her wrist thoughtfully. "How much stronger?" He hesitated. "Drika, show me. No technique, no tricks, just strength." "I do not think. Show me, Ethan." They locked hands. He looked her in the eyes and pushed, not hard enough to hurt her, but hard enough that she would know. Her arm went down in 2 seconds. He released her immediately, his heart pounding. "I am sorry," he said. She was staring at their hands, her expression unreadable. "How long?" "What?" "How long have you been able to do that?" "Since tonight. Since last week." He could not lie to her, not now. "Since the first night." The silence stretched out like a wire pulled taut. Drika stood up, and he saw the exact moment her face closed off, walls slamming down behind her eyes. "You have been losing on purpose." "Yes. Every night, every single night you let me win." "Drika, it was not like that. Then what was it like, Ethan?" Her voice was shaking. "Was it funny? Watching the orc girl puff up with pride every time she beat you, not knowing you were just patronizing her?" "No. God, no, I just wanted." He stopped. the words catching in his throat. "You wanted what?" "I wanted to spend time with you," he said quietly. "That first night I was going to win. I was going to beat you, and that was going to be the end of it. But then I looked at you and I thought, if I lose, she stays. We talk. I get to know her. And I wanted that more than I wanted to win some stupid contest. So you pitied me. I liked you." The words came out louder than he intended. "I liked you from the first moment you laughed at my terrible joke about plows. I liked the way you talked about the mountains, the way you hummed under your breath, the way you looked at me like I mattered. And I knew you were leaving soon, and I just wanted more time. That is all it was. More time." Drika wrapped her arms around herself. "You made me think I was stronger than I am. You are strong. You beat Magnus. Barely. And what happens when someone stronger comes along? What happens when I am not fast enough or lucky enough, and I lose because I have been training against someone who was throwing matches? That is why I offered to train you for real. No more holding back, no more. I do not want your pity, Ethan. It was never pity." "Then what do you call lying to someone for weeks? What do you call letting them believe something that is not true?" He flinched. "I call it cowardice. I should have told you how I felt instead of hiding behind arm wrestling matches. I should have just asked if I could buy you a drink, if I could talk to you, if I could." He stopped, his throat tight. "I am sorry. I am so sorry, Drika, but I have never pitied you, not for 1 second." She turned away, looking out at the fields beyond the barn. The first light of morning was breaking over the hills, turning everything gold and pink. "The camp is moving south next week," she said. "The passes are closing. I know. I have to go with them." "I know that too." She did not say anything else. She just walked out of the barn, and Ethan let her go. He did not go to the tavern that night or the night after. He threw himself into the harvest work, hauling the last of the wheat into storage, repairing the barn roof, chopping firewood until his shoulders screamed. Roland came by the third day with a basket of bread and a pointed look. "She has been asking about you," the tavern keeper said. "What did you tell her?" "That you are probably sulking out here like an idiot." Roland set the basket on the porch. "Are you going to let her leave without saying goodbye?" "She does not want to see me." "Did she say that?" "She did not have to." Roland sighed. "You young people make everything so complicated. She is hurt, boy. You wounded her pride. But she is still sitting at that table every night, looking at the door every time it opens. If you have any sense at all, you will get yourself to town before it is too late." Ethan wanted to. He wanted it so badly it felt like hunger. But every time he thought about walking into the tavern, about seeing Drika's face, he remembered the look in her eyes when she realized he had been lying to her. He could not bear to see that again. On the 5th night, someone pounded on his door hard enough to rattle the frame. Ethan opened it to find Drika standing on his porch, her jaw set and her eyes blazing. "You are a coward," she said. "I know. You lied to me. I know that too. And you have been hiding out here instead of coming to talk to me." "Yes." She stepped forward and he smelled pine and smoke and the soap she used. "I have been thinking about what you said, about wanting more time." "Drika, let me finish." She took a breath. "I have been coming to that tavern every night since I got to this town. Do you know why I started the arm wrestling contests?" He shook his head. "Because I was lonely," she said. "The other orcs in my crew are fine, but they do not talk much. They work and they sleep and they send their money home. And the humans in town look at me like I am going to steal their children or burn their houses down. Nobody wanted to sit with me. Nobody wanted to talk to me. So I figured if I could beat them at something, maybe they would stay. Maybe they would see me as a person instead of a monster." "You are not a monster. You say that now. But that first night when you sat down across from me, do you know what I thought? I thought, here is another one who wants to prove something. Here is another one who is going to lose and then hate me for it. And then you lost, and you smiled, and you bought me a drink, and you talked to me like I was just a person, like I mattered. Her voice broke on the last word. You made me feel like I mattered, Ethan. And then I found out you were lying the whole time, and it felt like every good thing I thought about you was a lie too. It was not a lie, he said desperately. You do matter. You matter more than anything. Then why did you let me win? Because I am an idiot who did not know how to just tell you that he stopped. That you what? The words were right there, pressing against his teeth. He had spent weeks hiding them, swallowing them down every time she smiled at him. He was done hiding. That I love you, he said. I have been in love with you since the second night, when you told me about watching the stars from your mother's goat pasture. And I knew you were leaving, and I knew I did not have much time, and instead of being honest, I just kept losing on purpose because it meant I got to sit with you for one more hour. It was selfish and it was stupid, and I am sorry. But I have never pitied you, Drika. I have never thought you were anything less than extraordinary. She was staring at him like she had never seen him before. You love me. Yes, you are in love with me, an orc woman who beats people at arm-wrestling for free drinks. I am in love with you, an orc woman who is brave and kind and funny, who hums when she is thinking and who looks at the world like it is full of wonder. The arm-wrestling is just a bonus. I am leaving in 4 days. I know. I have to go, Ethan. I have a contract. I know that too. She closed her eyes. This is a mess, I am aware. When she opened her eyes again, they were wet. I think I might love you too, which is incredibly inconvenient. His heart stopped, started again harder. You do? I have been miserable for 5 days because I missed you. I have been angry and hurt and confused, but mostly I just wanted to see you. I wanted to hear your voice and watch you smile and feel like I was home, even though I have never thought of anywhere as home before. She stepped closer until they were nearly touching. So yes, Ethan Jarrett. I think I love you too. He kissed her. He meant to be gentle about it, to ask permission, but she met him halfway and gentle went out the window. She tasted like honey and hope, and when her arms came around him, he felt like he could lift the whole world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. What are we going to do? She whispered. I have an idea, he said, but you have to trust me. She pulled back enough to look him in the eye. What kind of idea? Do you want to stay here? In this town, I mean, if you could. She stopped, considering. I don't know, I never thought about it. The work is in the camps, moving from place to place. What if there was other work? Work where you could use your strength, stay in one place. What are you thinking? He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. My neighbor, the one with the southern 40 acres. He also owns the old smithy in town. It has been closed for 2 years because he does not have the strength to work the forge anymore. What if we bought it? You said your father was a blacksmith. You could teach me, we could run it together. Ethan, I do not have that kind of money. I do. I have been saving for years. And a smithy would make more than a wheat farm ever could, especially with the logging camps nearby. They always need tools repaired, shoes for the horses, nails and hinges and 100 other things. She was shaking her head, but she was smiling too. You are talking about changing your entire life. I am talking about building a life with you if you want that. What about your farm? I can hire someone to work it or sell it, or let it go fallow for all I care. Drika, I have been alone in that house for 3 years, and it has never felt like home. But 5 minutes with you feels like exactly where I am supposed to be. She kissed him again, softer this time, and he felt her smile against his mouth. You are completely insane. Is that a yes? I have to finish my contract first. I cannot just walk away from the crew, they are counting on me. I know. I am not asking you to. I am asking you to come back when it is done. That could be months, spring at the earliest. I will wait, she laughed, and it sounded like music. You are serious about this, completely. What if I come back and you have changed your mind? Not possible. What if you meet someone else, Drika? He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. There is no one else. There has never been anyone else. It is you. It has been you since the moment you called me farm boy and grinned like you owned the world. She was crying now, tears tracking down her green skin. I am going to hold you to this, all of it. Good. They stood there on his porch as the sun set, holding each other like they could stop time through sheer force of will. Eventually, Drika pulled back. I should go, she said. The crew leaves before dawn tomorrow. I need to pack. One more thing, Ethan said. Before you go, come to the tavern with me tonight. Why? You will see. Roland had kept the tavern open late, and a decent crowd was still there when Ethan and Drika walked in. Magnus Stone was at the bar nursing a whiskey. He looked up when they entered and his expression curdled. Come back for another beating, Greenskin, he called. Drika tensed, but Ethan squeezed her hand. Actually, he said loudly enough for the whole room to hear, I came to issue a challenge. The tavern went quiet. Magnus turned, interested. What kind of challenge? Arm wrestling. You against me. If I win, you apologize to Drika for what you said last week. You tell everyone here that she beat you fair and square and that you are a sore loser. Magnus laughed. And if I win? I will apologize to you and pay your tab for a month. Ethan, what are you doing? Drika whispered. Trust me, he murmured back. Magnus stood, cracking his knuckles. You got yourself a deal, farm boy. Let us see what you are made of. They took their positions at Drika's usual table. Ethan met her eyes across the room and smiled. She looked terrified. Roland counted down. They clasped hands. Magnus pushed hard right from the start, putting his full weight into it. Ethan held steady, not giving an inch. Magnus's eyes widened. Ethan drove his hand down in one smooth motion, slamming Magnus's knuckles into the wood with a crack that echoed through the tavern. The room exploded. People were shouting, laughing, pounding on tables. Magnus sat back, staring at his hand like it had betrayed him. You owe the lady an apology, Ethan said. Magnus looked at Drika. Whatever he saw in her face made him flinch. I am sorry, he muttered. You beat me fair, I was an ass. Louder, Ethan said. I am sorry, Magnus shouted. She beat me fair and square and I am a sore loser. Happy. Very, Ethan said. He stood and walked to Drika, who was staring at him like he had grown a second head. You just beat Magnus Stone, she said. I did. You destroyed him. Yes. How long have you been able to do that? He grinned. Since the first night. She hit his shoulder, not hard enough to hurt but hard enough to make a point. You are impossible. You love me anyway. I must be as insane as you are. But she was smiling, and when he pulled her close, she melted into him. They stayed at the tavern for another hour, drinking cider and fielding questions from half the town about where Ethan had learned to arm wrestle like that. He deflected most of them, keeping one arm around Drika's waist like he could anchor her to the spot. When they finally left, he walked her back to the logging camp for the last time. I am going to miss you, she said at the bunkhouse door. I am going to miss you too, but you will be back. How do you know? Because I am going to write you every week, and because you promised. And because you love me, she kissed him, long and deep and desperate. I do. I really do. Then that is all that matters. He watched her go inside, then made the walk back to his farm. The house felt emptier than ever, but he did not let himself dwell on it. He had work to do. The next morning, after the logging crews had departed, Ethan rode into town and knocked on his neighbor's door. Samuel Winters was 73 years old, with arthritis in both hands and a farm he could barely manage alone. I want to buy your smithy. Ethan said without preamble. And I will work your southern 40 on shares if you need help with the harvest. Samuel raised an eyebrow. You are a farmer, boy. What do you know about blacksmithing? Nothing yet. But I am going to learn. I have someone coming in the spring who can teach me. The orc girl. It was not a question. Ethan nodded anyway. Her name is Drika. Samuel was quiet for a moment, then he smiled. Her father was Drika Coran, was he not? Blacksmith out of Ember Valley, you knew him. I bought a knife from him once 20 years ago. Best blade I ever owned. Still have it. He studied Ethan. If she has half her father's skill, you will do well. The smithy is yours for 800 silver. That is half what it is worth, but I like you, and I like the idea of the forge burning again. They shook on it that afternoon. Ethan spent the next week clearing out the smithy, replacing broken tools and talking to the old blacksmith 2 towns over who agreed to give him basic lessons. It was hard work, and he burned himself more times than he could count, but he kept at it. He wrote to Drika that first week, care of the logging company's main office. He told her about buying the smithy, about his burnt fingers and his terrible first attempts at making nails. He told her that he missed her, that the tavern felt wrong without her in it, that he was counting the days until spring. Her reply came 3 weeks later, forwarded from the logging camp in the southern hills. Her handwriting was blocky and careful, like she did not write often. Ethan, I got your letter. I read it 5 times. I cannot believe you actually bought the smithy. I cannot believe you are learning to blacksmith for me. I told my crew leader that I would not be renewing my contract in the spring. He was angry, but I do not care. I am coming back. I am coming home. Wait for me. Love, Drika. He kept the letter in his pocket and read it every night before bed. Winter came hard that year. The snow piled up to the windowsills and the roads became impassable for weeks at a time. Ethan worked the smithy by day and his farm by evening, learning the rhythm of the forge, the way metal sang when it was hot enough, the precise angle to strike to shape instead of shatter. He made horseshoes and nails and simple hinges, and he sold them to his neighbors for cost, just to practice. Roland came by in late December with a proposition. The tavern needs new hardware, hinges for the shutters, a new iron rod for the fire. If I pay you, will you make them? I am not very good yet, Ethan admitted. You are good enough, and I want to support your business. So Ethan made the hinges and the rod, and Roland paid him fairly, and word spread. By February, he had orders backed up for 2 weeks. The work was hard, harder than farming had ever been, but he loved it in a way he had not expected. There was something satisfying about taking raw metal and shaping it into something useful, something that would last. He wrote to Drika every week, and she wrote back every 2. Her letters were short but warm, full of details about the work and the mountains and how much she missed him. In one letter, she mentioned that she had been practicing the techniques he taught her, arm-wrestling the other workers in the evenings. I have not lost since I left, she wrote. I think you made me better. I think you made me better in a lot of ways. March came, and the snow began to melt. Ethan watched the roads clear with his heart in his throat. Any day now she would come. Any day. She arrived on the first day of April when the valley was green and the apple trees were beginning to bud. Ethan was at the forge, hammering out a pot hook, when he heard the door open behind him. He turned, and there she was. She looked thinner, like the winter had worn on her, but her eyes were bright. She was wearing traveling clothes, and she had a pack slung over one shoulder. Hi, she said. He dropped the hammer. You came back. I told you I would. He crossed the smithy in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She smelled like road dust and pine, and she was shaking, or maybe he was shaking, or maybe they both were. I missed you, he said into her hair. I missed you too, so much. They stood there for a long time, just holding each other. Finally, Drika pulled back and looked around the smithy. Her eyes widened. "Ethan, you did all this. I had help. But yes." She walked to the forge, running her hands over the tools, the anvil, the neat stacks of metal waiting to be shaped. "This is my father's setup, exactly like he had it." I asked around, found people who knew him who could tell me how he liked things arranged. She turned to him and her eyes were wet. "You did this for me. I did this for us." She kissed him then, and it felt like coming home. They worked side by side from that day forward. Drika took to the forge like she had never left it, her hands remembering the rhythms her father had taught her as a child. She was faster than Ethan, more precise, and she could shape metal in ways that seemed like magic. Within a month, they had more orders than they could fill. Within 2 months, they had hired a young apprentice, a human boy named Thomas who watched Drika work with awe in his eyes. "You are amazing," he told her one afternoon. She smiled. "My father was amazing. I am just remembering what he taught me." But Ethan knew better. He watched her work, watched the way she lost herself in the heat and the rhythm, and he knew that she was not just remembering. She was becoming. They moved into the small house behind the smithy, and Ethan sold his family's farm to Samuel's grandson. It was strange at first, living in town, hearing the sounds of people instead of wind through wheat. But waking up next to Drika every morning made it feel right. They did not go to the tavern much anymore. They were too busy, too tired at the end of the day. But sometimes, on a Saturday night when the orders were caught up and the apprentice had gone home, they would walk down the street and take Drika's old table by the fire. "You miss it?" Ethan asked one night. "The arm wrestling," she considered. "Sometimes. It was fun being unbeatable." "You still are." "Not against you," he grinned. "Want to test that?" She raised an eyebrow. "Are you actually going to try this time, or are you going to let me win?" "I am going to destroy you." "Big words, farm boy." They clasped hands. Roland watched from the bar, shaking his head. The few patrons in the tavern turned to watch. "Ready," Drika said. "Always." She pushed hard, and he met her strength for strength. They were evenly matched now after months of her working the forge, building new muscle. Their hands hovered at the midpoint, neither giving ground. "You have gotten stronger," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "So have you." They strained against each other, and Ethan felt the old instinct rising, the urge to let her win. But he pushed it down. She did not need that anymore. She did not want it. He angled his shoulder the way he had taught her, using leverage instead of strength, and drove her hand down to the table. She sat back, breathing hard, and smiled. "Best 2 out of 3, you are on." She won the second round. He won the third. They called it a draw and bought each other drinks. And when they walked home that night, hand in hand under the stars, Ethan felt like the luckiest man alive. A year after Drika returned, on a warm evening in May, Ethan closed the smithy early and took her to the valley overlook where you could see the whole town spread out below, lights twinkling in the growing dark. "What are we doing here?" she asked. "I wanted to show you something." "Ethan, I have seen the view 100 times. Not this view." He turned to her, and his heart was hammering so hard he thought she must be able to hear it. "Drika Coran, I have loved you since the second time I saw you. I have loved you through winter and distance and burnt fingers and more bad horseshoes than I can count. I have loved you every single day, and I want to love you for every single day I have left." He pulled the ring from his pocket. He had made it himself, a simple band of silver with a small green stone set in the center. "Will you marry me?" She stared at the ring, then at him, and for a horrible moment he thought she was going to say no. Then she laughed, bright and joyful, and tackled him so hard they both went down in the grass. "Yes," she said, kissing his face, his jaw, his mouth. "Yes, yes, yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. They were married in June, in the meadow behind the smithy with half the town in attendance. Samuel Winters officiated, and Roland provided the food, and Thomas the apprentice cried through the whole ceremony. Drika wore a dress the color of summer sky, and Ethan wore his best shirt, and when they kissed, the crowd cheered so loud it startled the birds from the trees. That night, lying in bed with his wife curled against his side, Ethan thought about the first night he had seen her, the choice he had made to lose on purpose. It had seemed like such a small thing at the time, one arm wrestling match thrown for the chance to talk to a pretty girl. He had not known it would change his entire life. "What are you thinking about?" Drika murmured. "That tavern, that first night, when you let me win, when I chose you over pride." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "I am glad you did. Even if it took me a while to forgive you for it. Are you glad, I mean, that you came back, that you stayed? Ethan." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I spent years moving from place to place, never putting down roots, never letting anyone get close. And then I met you and you saw me. Not an orc, not a challenge, just me. You gave me a home. You gave me a life I did not know I wanted. So yes, I am glad. I am so glad I could not put it into words." He pulled her down and kissed her slow and deep. I love you too. Even if you did cheat at arm wrestling. I prefer to call it strategic losing." She laughed and settled back against his chest. "Whatever you call it, it worked." 2 years later, on a cold morning in November, Drika gave birth to a son. They named him Zachary, and he had his mother's green skin and his father's blue eyes. Ethan held him in the smithy while Drika rested, and the baby wrapped one tiny hand around his finger and squeezed. "You are going to be so strong," Ethan whispered, "just like your mother." Zachary grew fast, and he was followed 2 years later by another boy, Felix, who screamed like a thunderstorm and laughed like summer rain. The smithy became a louder, messier, happier place. The boys grew up playing in the forge, learning to shape metal almost before they learned to read. Thomas the apprentice became a full partner in the business, and they expanded, taking on bigger orders, shoeing horses for the mail service, making tools for the logging camps. Drika never went back to arm wrestling for drinks. But every Saturday night, after the boys were in bed and the forge was banked, she and Ethan would sit at their kitchen table and clasp hands, and they would test each other, strength against strength, love against love. Sometimes she won, sometimes he won. It did not matter. What mattered was the time. On their 10th anniversary, they closed the smithy for the day and rode out to the valley overlook where Ethan had proposed. The boys stayed with Roland, who spoiled them with sweets and let them stay up past their bedtime. Drika and Ethan sat in the grass and watched the sun set over the town they had built a life in. "Do you ever regret it?" Drika asked. "Giving up farming, changing everything for me?" Ethan looked at her, at the woman who had become his whole world. Her hair was shot through with silver now, and there were lines around her eyes from smiling. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Not for 1 second," he said. "You, never." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to think strength was about winning, about being undefeated. But you taught me something different." "What is that?" "That real strength is choosing to be vulnerable, choosing to love someone even when it is scary, choosing to stay even when it would be easier to leave." She took his hand. "You lost to me on purpose for weeks, and I thought it was patronizing, but it was not. It was you saying, 'I choose you, I choose this, I choose us.' And that was the bravest thing anyone has ever done for me." Ethan kissed her temple. "I would do it again, every night for the rest of my life." "You do not have to. You already won the only match that mattered." They sat there as the stars came out. Two people who had found each other in the least likely of places, who had built something real and lasting from a series of thrown matches and stolen hours. The town below them glowed with lamplight, and somewhere in it, their sons were laughing, and their smithy stood ready for another day's work. Ethan thought about the man he had been, alone in his farmhouse, going through the motions of a life that felt empty. He thought about the choice he had made that first night to lose on purpose. It had seemed so small, it had changed everything. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what? For coming to that tavern. For staying, for coming back, for choosing me." Drika turned and kissed him, soft and sweet. "Always, Ethan. Always." They rode home in the dark, and when they arrived, the boys were asleep on Roland's couch, sticky with candy and smiling in their dreams. They carried them home and tucked them into bed, and then they went to their own room, and Ethan held his wife and thought about time. All those nights, buying her time with thrown matches and free drinks. All those hours, talking and laughing and falling in love. Time had been the most precious thing he could give her, and she had given it back to him tenfold. A lifetime of mornings waking up beside her. A lifetime of work shared and meals together and small hands reaching for his. A lifetime of love. He had lost on purpose, again and again, and in losing he had won everything that mattered. Years passed. The boys grew into strong young men who worked the forge alongside their parents. Zachary had his mother's gift for shaping metal, and Felix had his father's head for business. The smithy prospered, and the town grew around it, and Ethan and Drika grew old together. They never stopped their Saturday night matches. Even when their hands were gnarled with age and arthritis, even when it took them twice as long to lock their grips, they sat across from each other and pushed. Not to win, not anymore, just to touch, just to remember. On a spring morning 30 years after they first met, Ethan woke to find Drika already awake, watching him with those amber eyes that still made his heart stutter. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, farm boy," he smiled. She had not called him that in years. "What brought that on?" "I was thinking about the tavern, about the first time you sat down across from me, scared out of my mind. You did not show it. I am a good actor." She laughed, and the sound was just as beautiful as it had been 3 decades before. "You are a terrible actor. I knew you were nervous. I just did not know why. Because you were the most incredible person I had ever met, and I was terrified you would see right through me. I did see through you, eventually." She reached out and took his hand, but by then I loved what I saw. They lay there in the morning light, fingers entwined, and Ethan thought about all the choices that had led them here. The choice to lose, the choice to train her, the choice to buy the smithy, to wait through winter, to build a life. Every single one had been worth it. "Do you want to know a secret?" Drika said. "Always. That last match with Magnus before I left, I almost lost. I was so scared and I was going to give up. But then you said my name and I looked at you and I knew." "Knew what?" "That you believed in me." Really believed, not just patronizing belief, not pity. You looked at me like I was capable of anything, and it made me capable of anything. Ethan squeezed her hand. "You were always capable, I just reminded you." "No," she shook her head. "You gave me something to fight for. Someone to come back to. You gave me hope." They rose and dressed and went down to the smithy, where their sons were already at work. The forge burned bright, and the smell of hot metal filled the air, and Ethan stood beside his wife and watched their legacy take shape. That night they sat at their kitchen table one more time. Their hands were old now, the skin thin and spotted, but when they locked together, Ethan felt the same jolt he had felt the first night. The same connection. "Ready?" Drika asked. "Always." They pushed, and this time neither of them won. They just held there, strength against strength, love against love, until their arms trembled and they both let go, laughing. "Draw," Ethan said. "Draw, Drika agreed. And that was how it should be, Ethan thought. Not winning, not losing. Just being together. Just choosing each other, again and again, for all the years they had. The tavern was still standing, though Roland had passed on and his daughter ran it now. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Ethan and Drika would walk down and sit at the old table by the fire. The wood was scarred with decades of matches, and if you looked closely, you could still see the crack from where Drika had slammed Magnus's hand down all those years ago. "You remember what you said to me that night?" Drika asked once, tracing the crack with one finger. "After I beat Magnus when I was so scared. I said you deserved to win. You said I could be stronger, and you were right, not because of the training, though that helped, but because you made me believe it." Ethan covered her hand with his. "We made each other stronger." "Yes," she said softly. "We did." On Ethan's 55th birthday, the whole town gathered at the smithy for a celebration. There was food and music and dancing, and Zachary and Felix presented their parents with a gift. A new sign for the smithy, hand-carved and painted. It read Jarrett and Jarrett, Master Smiths, and below that, in smaller letters, established in love and iron. Drika cried when she saw it, and Ethan held her while the crowd cheered. Their granddaughter, Zachary's daughter Fiona, tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Grandpa, is it true you used to let Grandma win at arm-wrestling?" Ethan looked at Drika, who smiled. "For a while, yes." "Why?" "Because I loved her, and I wanted to spend time with her, and I did not know how else to make her stay." Fiona considered this seriously. "That is kind of sneaky." "It is very sneaky," Drika said, "but it worked." "Are you glad he did it?" Drika pulled Ethan close and kissed his cheek. "I am glad he chose me, however he did it." The party went late into the night, and when everyone finally left, Ethan and Drika stood in the empty smithy looking at their new sign. "Established in love and iron," Ethan read. "I like that. It is accurate." Drika turned to him. "We have built something good here. We have built something extraordinary." She took his hand, and they walked home through streets they had walked 1,000 times, past houses full of people they had armed and shod and equipped, past the tavern where it had all begun. The night was clear and the stars were bright, and Ethan felt the weight of years and love and choices settling over him like a blanket. He had lost on purpose, all those years ago. He had thrown match after match, buying time with a woman he barely knew, hoping for something he could not name. And she had given him everything. A life, a family, a purpose. She had given him herself freely and fully, and he had tried every day since to be worthy of that gift. In their bedroom, as they settled into bed, Drika curled against his side the way she had for 30 years. "Ethan," she murmured. "Yes. If you could go back to that first night, would you do anything differently?" He thought about it, really thought. About all the roads not taken, all the choices that had led them here. "No," he said finally. "I would do it exactly the same. Every loss, every mistake, every moment. Because they all led here. To you, to us, to this life." "Good answer," she said, and he felt her smile against his chest. They fell asleep like that. Two people who had chosen each other across a tavern table, who had built a life from thrown matches and honest work and love that had only deepened with time. Outside, the smithy stood silent, waiting for tomorrow's fire. And in the tavern, the old table sat empty, a monument to the night a lonely orc woman and a lovesick farmer had found each other and changed everything. Ethan dreamed of the forge, of shaping metal and shaping a life, of strong hands and stronger hearts. He dreamed of his wife, young and fierce, slamming an opponent's hand down with a roar. He dreamed of his sons learning the trade, of his granddaughter asking questions, of a future built on the foundation he and Drika had laid. And when he woke, she was there, watching him with those amber eyes, and he knew that every choice, every loss, Every moment of fear and hope and love had been worth it. "Good morning, my love," she said. "Good morning," he replied and kissed her, and the day began again as it had for 30 years, as it would for however many years they had left. The smithy opened. The forge burned. The work continued. And at the end of every week, two old hands would clasp together across a kitchen table and push and hold and release. Not keeping score anymore. Not trying to win, just loving. Just being. Just choosing each other again and again in the only match that ever really mattered.